We get a lot of questions all the time about using fertilizer in furrow. How much can I use? What products should I be using? Is it safe? Can I use it in soybeans? We need to answer all those questions, Darren.
That's a lot of questions right there. When you think about in-furrow fertilizer, the big thing I'm worried about is I don't want to hurt the seed. I'm trying to deliver a portion of the nutrient needs of my crop, but I just can't hurt anything, so we're concerned about how much salt is in that fertilizer.
Too much salt kills. We talk about it often on Ag PhD. A little bit of salt, not a big issue, but if you have a lot of salt, especially when you're talking about a tiny little seed, that's a big problem. So we've got to be real careful about when we're using these in-furrow fertilizers if they have quite a bit of salt. It's not a real huge deal if we're getting some rain and, you know, everything kind of flushes through, but boy, in a dry spring, that's where we see the most problem.
Here's the question I've got, Brian. I talk to guys all the time and say, well, I'm using 7 or even 10 gallons of 1034O in my furrow. And I say, will that deliver all the phosphorus that you need for the year? And almost every time guys are like, well, no, I'm still gonna have to put more on here or there. Well, then why are you putting that much in furrow? Just put a little bit more somewhere else. Now, if you're off to the side in a 2x2, or if you're going with strip till and you're dropping some deep below the seed, I mean, you can do a lot of those types of things. Put some soil between your product and the seed. You increase your safety tremendously. But just don't put so much in the furrow. I don't understand that.
So our general guideline is in 30-inch rows, we like to see at the most 5 pounds per acre. So that would amount to of salt. So that would amount to 3 gallons of 1034O. That's it. We're never exceeding 3 gallons of 1034O on our farm. And if you want to throw in some micronutrients, like in our operation, we want to throw 2 quarts of micronutrients in, I'm going to cut the rate back a little more on 1034O. Now I'm down to 2 gallons because I've got a little bit of salt in the micronutrient package. So 2 gallons, that's it if you're throwing micros out there. And you say, well, I've been using 5 gallons or 8 gallons or 10 gallons for years and I haven't had a problem. Well, you haven't had a problem yet. Too many times Darren and I have been on farms where they hadn't had a problem for 10, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden they do have a problem, and it's a 50 bushel an acre problem in corn. You don't want to have that happen. Why take that risk? Like Darren said, find a different approach, or instead of finding a different way to put the fertilizer on, you can get lower salt fertilizers too. That can definitely help, so you can use a little bit higher rate in furrow.
Well, there certainly are lower salt products you can use, like Pro Germinator and Sure-K. I haven't found lower salt alternatives that we could put in the furrow, and I'm using them at higher rates. I'm using them at higher rates than even Brian's comfortable with. And maybe I'm going to be one of those guys, Brian, 10 years down the road that you say, ha, Darren, I told you, there 1 year out of 10 you got burned. But so far I just haven't seen that. And you know, when you've got that low a level of salt, you've just got so much more confidence in the products you're using.
Yes, you have a lot less risk. So what I would suggest you do is keep that rate relatively low, and certainly you can go a little higher with Pro Germ and Sure-K than you can with 1034O. But with every liquid product, every product you're going to put in furrow, there's a limit to how much you want to put on. So just don't get too carried away with that. And if you want to use more liquid, that's fine. Just put it in a 2x2. No big deal. If you want to strip till, you can go directly below the seed a few inches. Whenever you put dirt in between your seed and your fertilizer, you have really safened things up. You can use a lot more fertilizer. That's what we're after, because we know we have to have plant food if we're going to raise a great crop.
You're talking about corn, and the degree of safety with putting liquid in the furrow on corn is much greater than a crop like soybeans, for example.
Definitely. We got to keep our rate really low on soybeans, and I don't have any problem putting a little bit of stuff in furrow on soybeans. Some people will say don't use any in furrow in soybeans. We've just found as long as you're diluting with water. Okay, so let's say we use 1 full gallon of liquid fertilizer, a little bit of Pro Germ, a little bit of Sure-K, a little bit of micronutrients, and then we dilute it down with 3 or 4 gallons of water. That's actually fairly safe. And we want to try everything we can to always keep it off the seed, whether it's corn or soybeans or any crop. Try to keep it off the seed. But again, same thing with soybeans as we're talking with corn. If you want to bump the rates, just put it in a 2x2, put it in a strip till, do it some other way.
All right, here's the other thing to think about is what is your soil type and what are your organic matter levels in your soil? If you've got good heavy soil, if you've got high levels of organic matter, your safety factor is much bigger. You can get away with using more fertilizer than you could if your organic matter levels were very low and you had really sandy soil.
Right.
So you have to keep those things in mind.
Right, and if you're in a high rainfall area too.
And you know, those things can change as you go across a field. You're going to have differences in soil moisture, differences in soil texture, and so forth. So just kind of keep an eye on that on your farm. If you're heading across a field, like we've got some fields where we've got really good heavy ground and then we've got some sandy streaks through them, be careful. If you're putting that same rate on all the way through the field, you could run into some trouble in those sandy areas.
I guess the last thing we'd mention, we were talking about in-furrow fertilizer here, but there are other products you can throw in furrow too that really don't give you a lot of additional risk, like insecticide. Capture LFR, for example, is very popular. We use some of that on our farm. You can use something like Challenge 2050. It's a biological product. You can put it in furrow. Also not going to add risk for you, not going to hurt the seed or anything like that. There are a number of other biological products that you might put in furrow as well. So I guess what we're trying to say here is the fertilizer is really the dangerous thing. You just have to be careful, mostly with salt.
Well, fertilizer is certainly important, but so is weed control. Our Weed of the Week is coming up next.